What is the impact of AI on startups or organizations in general? You're watching Microsoft Startup AI School, a Microsoft Reactor series of exciting and informative sessions where we introduce you to the basics of Gen AI and show how you can use AI to enhance your creativity, productivity, and efficiency. Hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne, a program manager with Microsoft Reactor and your host for the Microsoft Startup AI School series. Welcome to our 8th episode of our series, and today's topic is an important one. But before we start, drop an emoji in the chat to tell us where you're joining us from, and what our topic for today, responsible AI, means to you. So I'm also going to drop a link where you can watch our on-demand sessions or sign up for more here. Yeah, so today I'm truly super honored to have Ben Gilbert, Microsoft AI Legal Lead, join us today. So Ben is Microsoft's vanguard in AI legal advocacy, and he plays a pivotal role in shaping the ethical development and deployment of AI technologies in Microsoft Asia. So not only is Ben a dynamic and multifaceted legal professional, he also has a rich background in technology and innovation. An amazing combination and the best person to moderate today's panel, from principles to practice, realizing responsible AI. So I know you all can't wait to meet him and hear from him. So let's have Ben join us right away. Hello. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Suzanne. How are you?
I'm great. Great to have you join us. Just to let you know, I was super stoked when you agreed to be on this session and have been looking forward to today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I actually just got back from a holiday in South Africa where for the first time in a while, it was the farthest I could have been from AI. So it's good to be here, and getting back into the swing of things is one of the first things I do back.
Right. Okay. Good to know that you're back. So our introduction on you earlier covers only a small portion of your stellar, at least in my opinion, stellar bio. And I know you're going to cover on what you do later in your presentation, and also share along with our two distinguished speakers, Christian and Isuru. So I'm curious, however, is the chatbot that you've developed. I saw it in your bio. What do you tell us more?
Sure. So this is it predated the Gen AI revolution. And so it's actually kind of funny. At the time in 2017 that I worked on it with some engineering colleagues and some other sort of lawyers around the world, we were really proud of it. But since Gen AI, the revolution, it's kind of become embarrassing, and we've decommissioned that particular bot now because Copilot does a lot of the stuff that we worked on. But that said, we developed a legal chat bot with language understanding intelligence service, or LUIS, to help my clients and the clients of Microsoft around the world ask questions about NDAs, MOUs, compliance matters, and many other things. And it helped shift some of our lawyers to do more impactful work, but it also meant that my clients didn't have to come and speak to lawyers, because we know people don't really like speaking to lawyers all that often if they can avoid it.
Amazing. I mean, I do have hybrid skills, but I can't say that I've developed anything as innovative or as useful as what you have. So yeah, just to know a more casual side of you, we're going to do a 5 this or that question. This is totally off the script. Yeah, but just to know, you on a more outside of your, your legal tech gig, right? So here we go. We'll start off with something easy. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Okay. Early bird or night owl?
Ooh, I perform better at night, but my role as a sort of regional person and reporting into a global team, I have to actually do both. And so the hard bit for me is trying to find time in the middle to take a break.
Right. Okay. So a bit of like, I think for me as well, like things have changed a little. I used to be like an early bird, but now I'm like a night owl. Okay. So the next question, travel with a map or wander without a plan?
Wander without a plan, I think, for me. Although in saying that, my holiday to South Africa, we definitely had a plan, and I was grateful for it.
Right. Okay. And then the power to teleport anywhere instantly, or be able to read minds at will?
So in my work, reading minds would be a real bonus from a negotiation perspective. But outside of work, I think teleporting anywhere at will is definitely the winner. I love to travel, and to get rid of the airport time would be fantastic.
Right. Okay. And lastly, I think I know the answer for this one, but we'll try. Superhero or supervillain?
As a sealer, as part of the legal team, I have to say superhero. But honestly, the way the anti-hero evolution is coming, I almost think I'd rather be a villain. And maybe as a lawyer, some of you would think that I'm more likely to be a villain than a hero anyway.
Right. No, I actually thought you would prefer to be a superhero. So I thought you would be the best person to moderate today's panel. So yeah, I hope that was fun, Ben.
It was, thank you. And hopefully the audience has learned a little bit about me.
Right. Okay, so I think just as a code of conduct, before we start, I hope everybody can be respectful in your comments and have a great time. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat and we'll try to answer them during Q&A. So Ben, I will probably need you to share your screen now if you can on your end. Because there is a bit of delay. There's a bit of lag on my end. I'm not sure whether you see it on my screen.
It was up briefly, but it seems to have disappeared again. Do you want me to stop sharing and reshare?
No, it's okay. It could be on my end. So I'm sorry, because with digital like live screen, things may actually happen. So you can see I'm still frozen. I can see it on my YouTube. I'm frozen. So I'm gonna come back shortly. So just give me like 2 minutes. I'll be back.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Hi, I'm so sorry.
No problem.
I hope I didn't. Okay, so I'm gonna just bring your screen up, and I shouldn't pull you up, Ben. Over to you right now.
Great, thank you, Suzanne. And I know all of you are really excited to hear from our colleagues from Toku and BlueSheets.ai, but I'll go through a little bit about the Microsoft view of responsible AI. We've been doing it for a little while now, well before Gen AI became the thing that it is, right back to 2016. And so there's some things that, I want to be very clear. I don't have sales quota. This is not intended to be a sales exercise at all. I am a lawyer, and so sometimes I wish I had sales quota so I could get some of those bonuses. But here it really is about sharing what we've learned, and also, flagging some things so that you have an opportunity to share what you're learning along the way, and to ask questions about Microsoft's approach, because even though we've been doing it for a while, we freely acknowledge that we don't have all the answers and that everyone's learning together. And I'm actually really keen to hear from all of you, or some of you, about your journey. So start off by grounding us in what we mean by responsible AI. And I say we at Microsoft because there are different versions of this all over the place. You've got governments who have come out with what they think responsible AI looks like. Every mature organization has a version of this, but there are some core principles that underpin the responsible AI topic generally, which seem to be enduring, and you can kind of change the words, but the themes prevail. And so when you see me roll through the rest of these slides, what we kind of ground ourselves in and what we try to create an environment for our customers like you to use is these principles of fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, and underpinning all of those principles, being transparent, which increasingly is becoming legally required, but also taking accountability, or adequately assigning accountability as well. And there's a number of ways we do that. Along the bottom of the screen, you'll see that, and I'll cover a few of them in the remainder of this quick presentation. I want to start as well by just checking in and hearing, or maybe articulating, why you should care, because I think the startups environment is a little bit different to some of the sort of more mature or regulated customers that I speak to regularly, and so maybe it's not at the front of your mind. But even if it's not at the front of the mind, if you're playing around in AI, I think you should care, and there's a few reasons for that. The first one is that if you have aspirations to sell to customers, to enterprise customers or regulated customers, they will care. And so it'll be harder for you to sell your offering if you don't get this right. And what I didn't put there, but might be relevant as well, is if you've got an exit strategy, you're looking to IPO, you're looking to maybe get some capital investment, then those capital investors may also want to understand your approach to responsible AI if you are an AI centric or an AI integrated company. The second one I don't want to dwell too much on, even though I'm a lawyer. There are certainly reputational consequences if you get things wrong, and Microsoft probably knows that better than anyone. We released Tay a few years ago, and it very quickly devolved into a racist mess. And so we learned from that when we moved to the OpenAI offering that we have today. But aside from the reputational consequences, there are increasingly financial consequences as well. And so that leads me into the third reason that you might want to care, which is that the regulatory environment is increasing. So far, the only sort of hard binding law in place today is in China. So if you're selling there, you'll need to probably figure this out. But the EU AI Act has passed, and there's a staggered implementation process. So if you plan to do anything in the EU, you'll probably need to have a handle on this. And South Korea and Asia is moving pretty quickly as well. So there's a wave coming. The more you do now, the less you'll have to do later, and the less it'll cost you in the long run as well. And we'll talk through some examples of what you can do in the short and medium term to help get ahead of those regulations. On that customer piece, this is what we're hearing, and I'm sure you're probably hearing something similar. I'd love to hear, chuck something in the chat if you're starting to get these questions or if you don't have answers to them. But big one for us is trade secrets and sensitive data. If people are using AI products, does the data protection and confidentiality commitments apply, and how do they apply in the context of a Gen AI service versus a cloud service versus an on-prem service, etc. How do you keep personal information safe? One thing I'm going to talk about as the lawyer, although maybe you won't care about it as much, is litigation for intellectual property. So, there's a big thing in the news about whether there's going to be copyright infringement. Some of you may know that OpenAI and Microsoft have been sued by a couple of media in the US. Those cases are ongoing, but you'll hear from me later about the fact that notwithstanding those claims, you're covered if you use our products. Reputational risk I talked about. For those of you who are regulated or supplying to regulated customers, a lot of people are asking, what are the regulators saying about using AI and Gen AI? And then, is it going to be super costly to do an AI use case? And does it cost more if I have to do it responsibly? And so our approach to this in Microsoft is we think of ourselves as the first party user of all of our AI services. And so we learn along the way, both in terms of our development and as users, about how to do this the right way and how to do it responsibly. And rather than hoard that information, we think it's important to just get it out there. So there's a number of tools, and I'll have links, for anyone who's interested, we can share the slides around afterwards, and there's links in there. There are things that we use internally at Microsoft that you can just grab and play. And so the impact assessment template and impact assessment guide are really great for if you decide that you want to have a process for higher risk use cases and make sure that you've got all of the risk mitigations in place before you push it to market. You don't have to sort of reinvent the wheel on doing an impact assessment. You can just use Microsoft's and tweak it however you like. And the guide you can tweak to include your examples, but really it's kind of off the shelf, helpful and ready to go. And as if you were to use Microsoft's platform service, Azure OpenAI, to develop an application, we provide a transparency note that if you get questions from customers or regulators around responsible AI concepts, the transparency note is going to be your go-to response in an FAQ, so an RFP, RFQ type file. So links to those things are in the presentation, as I mentioned. The other thing that we learned along the way is when there are real life impacts on humans, then there probably needs to be a bit more process, look at it, and some mitigation from learnings across different use cases applied to those scenarios. So if you're working with Microsoft, you have a high-risk use case that you want to go through, reach out to the Microsoft account team, and we have what's called our Office of Responsible AI. They have dedicated teams that will work with customers to think through how it's not a blanket ban on doing something, but how you might like to do risk mitigation steps to make sure that you do those use cases in a way that minimizes the likelihood of those harms. Hopefully, if you're playing around in Azure OpenAI, you've seen Azure Content Safety. We're working on, we've obviously got that embedded within our Copilot suite. So if you're using Copilot from 365, Copilot for Dynamics, Security Copilot, or GitHub Copilot, by default, this Azure Content Safety is turned on. So if anyone tries to use prompts that have hate, sexual content, asking about how to commit self-harm or violence, those will be filtered and flagged in the portal, and so you can deal with them appropriately. It's an optional add-on service within Azure OpenAI, so you can download it or not, because some use cases actually may not be appropriate to be filtering out certain categories, because you're developing game and you don't want violence to be tagged or blocked to slow down the deployment of a game, for example. So the other thing that we do is our research team is constantly working on ways to keep improving our approach to responsible AI. And so we've also published guidelines for human AI interaction. The image there isn't great. So again, feel free to take down that link, follow it, or wait for the slides to be distributed afterwards. But if you're developing an application and taking it out to market, and there's going to be sort of humans interacting with it, then this is a really great guide to use as a starting point. There's some key things that we want to commit to you as a customer, and these are going to be things that if you're developing an application, your customers are going to want assurance for it as well. And so, it's, as has always been the case, we won't share your data. We have confidentiality obligations. The key thing as well, because Microsoft is in a partnership with OpenAI, there was concern that we were sharing inputs or output content with OpenAI to train their models. And actually, this is the difference between if you use ChatGPT as a public user versus if you use Microsoft's Azure OpenAI, is that we're not using that data to train the models at all. That we think that the models are trained for what they need to be trained for. To improve them, you can do RAG, you can ground them in particular databases, etc. But we don't think that the way you use Azure OpenAI or our Copilots should be used to train the models. And then, of course, our entire data protection addendum, all of our commitments around security, data protection, privacy apply to our AI services. And then again, that's probably a difference between using some of the open source or free, publicly available LLMs or SLMs versus coming to an enterprise grade service like Microsoft. As the lawyer, as I mentioned, we do have to flag this groundbreaking sort of approach, which is we've just said, if you get sued for an IP infringement claim, copyright claim, because you've used either our AI products or the outputs of them, then we'll go and defend that claim for you. We've got an army of lawyers, fortunately not me, ready to go and sue defend you from the people suing you. And then we'll also cover the costs if we do have to settle, or if the judge rules in their favor. And we'll also cover your reasonable legal fees in sort of assisting with that claim. So from a startup's perspective, you can just take that risk off the table. Basically, you come to us, you use the products in the right way, and if anyone sues you, Microsoft has you covered. It means you probably don't need to engage a legal team either, because you can rely on ours. This slide kind of speaks for itself. A few months ago, I had a version of this slide that only had about 7 or 8 compliance offerings. We're up to 40. Microsoft's total product suite has about 100. So you'll see that we're ramping up there. We contributed to the ISO 42K responsible AI standard, and so you'll see that appearing there once we start getting certified against those as well. Again, these are questions that are probably going to pop in RFPs about, if you're taking to market an LLM-powered solution, then your customers are going to want to ask whether the underlying technology is certified to international standards. And so you'll see there we've got a mix of global standards, regional specific standards, industry specific standards, and they're expanding all the time. Really, you'll all be interested in sort of so what and how do I, now that maybe I've convinced you that it's important, how do I do it? And we'll learn actually, I think, more from our experts from Toku and Blue Sheets AI in a second, but there's a couple of things that I've learned from my interactions with customers, some super mature, some very well resourced, and others that are sort of at the other end of the spectrum where perhaps they don't have as much to spend. And so the first thing I'll say is, we learned a lot. We created these resources for our internal purposes first. We've made them available. We don't assert any ownership rights. We have customers that are using these to create their versions of them all the time, and I'm asked, from time to time to contribute to them, tweaking them for those customers' use cases. So please go ahead and just check them out. It's a nice, easy starting point, or better yet, if you've got a compliance or legal professional in your organization, send them to go look at them instead. The second thing, this is thematically what I've seen people do that are lighter touch. And so the starting point is just build a Gen AI policy. I think, it would be a mistake to assume that people aren't using ChatGPT. Probably, there's statistic out there like 70% of people use it for home and work in the region. Having a policy, I think you could either outright ban it, in which case people will probably still use it, or you can say, look, we've vetted a couple of other providers. We're comfortable with their data protection approach, the risk mitigation approach, and so please use this one rather than that one. Or say, these are the scenarios which you can use ChatGPT or another public or open source version of an LLM or SLM, and here's the scenarios where we want you to use these other ones. So that's a nice, easy starting point. Another one is just, creating a process where if it's high risk and it's, getting you into that reputational harm category, then maybe you have a different process. Maybe you have a V team of responsible AI champs that will take a look at an intended use case or help people through an AI impact assessment. And so, that's the combination of 2 and 3, where if it's in that high risk category, there's a SME group that will evaluate the use case and provide advice. Accountability, there's a number of different ways to do this. Even carrying out impact assessments on the higher risk uses is a form of accountability. You'll have a report that comes out of that, and it'll show how you've documented some potential risks and how you plan to mitigate them. And if you're working with Microsoft, you can borrow heavily from our transparency reports, because a lot of the content that goes into an AI impact assessment template is covered in our transparency notes. And if you are responsible for dev teams, or you have some dev teams in your organization that are grappling with how to do responsible AI, a starting point is an AI standard. And again, we have an AI standard for all of Microsoft's dev teams. It's pretty robust, and so you can borrow it. You could even strip it down for the bits that matter to your organization. And then the last point I'll say there is there's actually, we've invested with partners in creating responsible AI offerings. And so if you have some budget to think about this, either from a pure use case perspective or from an organizational governance perspective all up, then, the partners on screen, and that list is expanding, have offerings. Some of them offer t-shirt sizing, right from sort of 5-10K offerings right through to, a couple of million over the course of a year. So go and speak to them if you want more help than simply, borrowing from our content. And with that, I think that comes to the end of my Microsoft worldview presentation, but I think now it's the really cool bit, which is hearing from the people that are in your position that are doing this live today. And so I'm really excited to introduce Isuru from Toku and Christian from bluesheets.ai. And I think it's best for them to introduce themselves. So Isuru, can I ask you to jump on, talk a little bit about yourself and Toku?
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me. So my name is Isuru. I am the head of AI at Toku. So Toku is an enterprise-grade cloud communication and customer experience tech provider. So what we do is we help businesses to navigate through digital transformation complexities and enhance customer experience. So that means that we do mission-critical customer-facing business processes and like contact centers. And around last year, we started heavily investing in AI with a focus that to build robust, safe AI applications for APAC. And also, as part of that, we recently we got into a process of acquiring one of the AI companies. AI Chat, it's still ongoing. And we also released a couple of models recently tuned for APAC, performing, delivering state-of-the-art performance because we tuned them separately on AI languages, APAC languages and accents. So that's a bit about myself and what we do.
Yeah, that's really exciting, and I think the really cool thing about that is one of the first use cases that we're hearing from Microsoft that people are really wanting to play around with is in that sort of maybe not contact center, but like support agent style thing. So I know you'll have a lot of really great things to talk about, and I know that a lot of businesses need that those contact centers to help them scale. So hopefully we can hear more there. Christian, can I invite you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about bluesheets.ai?
Yep, of course. Thanks for having me today. I'm Christian. I'm the CEO and product owner of BlueSheets, and we are building AI-powered workflows for companies to automate their back office tasks. And that ranges a bit broadly from things like accounting and bookkeeping tasks, all the way to more complex user application flows, and also sometimes customer support journeys. So our goal really is to wrap around internal legacy systems and allow data to flow in and out much faster. And basically what you get with us is a Copilot for your back office teams. So our company is based in Singapore, and we are doing business across Asia Pacific as well as globally in the US and in Europe at this point.
Wow, so yeah, pretty diversified. That's amazing, and I really like the idea. I'd like to hear from you about not just your own AI development journey, but you're in there working with customers, and so you'll have that first-hand experience as well in terms of the integration work that they're doing. So this is really exciting, great. Very keen to hear more. And so I guess the first question to both of you is, this is a responsible AI session, and so. Maybe I'll start with you, Isuru, but this question is going to go to you as well, Christian. What is Toku's approach to responsible AI?
Yeah, so at Toku, we take responsible AI seriously, and we are committed to building fair, secure, and accountable AI systems. But when we do it in APAC-like regions, it's challenging because of the diversity. And even if you look at a country like Singapore, even though it's very small, diversity-wise, it's very rich. So you can see that the project requirements, everything get very complicated, and that's a challenge. So that's why it's very important for an organization like Toku to have a repeatable process that we can apply to make the right decisions and navigate through these complexities, right? So our key pillars for responsible AI is first, starting with fairness. and then explainability, and also we respect the privacy, and also accountability. Fairness is all about how you deal with the data, the biasness in data. And data, AI is trained with data, so data is a reflection of the real world. So whatever the biases that you have in the real world will be reflected in data, and when you train AI on them, probably they're going to be augmented in a bad way. So it comes down to the fact that how you deal with qualifying your data. A good example is we recently released our speech recognition model, giving state-of-the-art performance for Singapore English. Even though it's just the English language, the diversity in English alone is too much in Singapore. So training an unbiased model was challenging. And then we decided, depending on the AI applications, to have fairness, how do we qualify data? How do we build the data pipelines? We engineered them separately. And next, explainability. It's also a challenge, and there's no recipe or single method how do you go about it, because now we are dealing with big models like large language models, and not only that, we orchestrate these models on top of each other, and then where's the visibility, right? So of course there are techniques technically engineers use, but those techniques will give you a rough idea, an indirect idea about how an AI model works. Like you can look at the attention maps and all that. But when you layer them on top of each other, final application, it's very important that you have the visibility and explain why AI automations came to why it came to some decisions and or do something in a specific way. And again, it's our approach is our solution-wise, we have adopted different approaches unique to the solution, because there's no single recipe for that. And privacy policy and respecting the privacy is another thing. And I think there are two parts to that, because company like Toku companies like Toku train on customer data sometimes to enhance the accuracy performance. So there's this aspect of how do you treat customer data, because as an example, if you train a generative language model, let's say on customer data, and maybe in the inference time, at the inference time, they might be spitting the training data, simply violating the basic privacy policies that you have in an organization. And then you have the other aspect when you really launch them. How do you manage customers' privacy, and how do you fine-tune the models and improve them, and how your entire life cycle works? And that's the other angle. And also the accountability is also a lot, and I think it scales from the software developer to the people who train the AI, and to the supervisors who really monitor. So we have frameworks around the key touch points, and who's responsible, and how do we mitigate any risks that we have, because we offer different solutions for contact centers, as an example, from speech recognition to speech summarizations, analytics, to now going into voice bots or chatbot solutions using Gen AI. Yes.
Awesome, thank you. I mean, fascinating to see there. You've got 4, but those 4 in slightly different ways. I think explainability was the only one that we call transparency, or we kind of cover explainability within transparency. But those 4 are very much reflected, and it goes back to that point around you can use different words, but those enduring values are pretty similar. So I'm interested to hear now from BlueSheets.ai's perspective. Christian, what's your approach to responsible AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot was said already. There's a few sort of guardrails you have to build in especially when it comes to privacy, etc. However, I think our approach is to work backwards on the automation flows with the client. So likely we built in checkpoints, and also we actually have direct access, or the client has direct access to logs and decision making that is done, so to speak, by the machine. So at any point in time, the client is in full control. I think one key aspect is that traceability that we're addressing with this. So we need to be able to point at where in the process AI has sort of taken over a certain task, and also we have to pinpoint when AI has made decisions based on the data. Yeah? So I mean, there's multiple ways on how new technologies can be used at this point. It is actually a very sensitive topic, because even things like simple data corrections, like for example, you spot anomalies in a data set, you cannot just correct it with using AI without potentially running into issues on how this decision around the correction has been made. And so yeah, we think, I mean, if I want to add anything that was to what was already said, is the traceability aspect is probably going to be the most important piece for us, where we're laying it completely open as to what happened and where and when, and then the checkpoints will be there for the client to just immediately either stop a process or interfere with the process at any point in time as well. I think the ultimate message here, just to also be very clear, is we're at the very beginning of learning how to address these problems. I think we are putting in guardrails, and we usually lean on our clients, and we also lean on the cloud providers themselves, because I don't think we dare to understand yet what implications can be if certain functions within a large corporation are fully carried out by autonomous workflows, and so yeah, this is something that will happen slowly, and I don't think there's any shortcutting either. Here, for example, in Singapore, where the government is very much concerned about these topics as well, we expect a lot of guidance from the government, and I know that there's a lot of things in the works already in terms of guardrails for AI, APIs for us to actually do screening of certain algorithms and codes, etc. So all of this will come. It is just not yet very established, and so everything is a bit nascent in the whole sort of evolution on this. We're starting to understand what could happen and will happen eventually.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think that the Singapore government is taking a really sensible approach in that they're wanting to foster innovation, but they are also thinking frankly about the risks that we all need to work on. You did pique my interest with the traceability point, and when the model is making decisions. Have you worked with any of your customers on an AI impact assessment or similar, when some of those decision making pieces maybe might be more consequential than others? Christian?
Yeah, we have. I think what is important to note is that we are strictly not introducing models trained on public data into a large corporation. All we are allowed to do, and that's good, is to use company data to fine-tune models. And what happens then is, again, this is in between the company and the vendor. In our case, we are discovering sometimes with the client if the data, if the decision that is made at the end of the trail has any bias or not, and if so, what that bias is. Right? All of these are usually healthy bias because they're based on internal logic and rules. I will give you an example. If you have an insurance claim, and you for example had an accident, and you want to be paid back money from your insurance company, but you only bought an insurance policy that covers you for $2,000 for an accident, and you are trying to claim for $2,500, then it is a very good a moment for AI to decide that this is not going to go through because you cannot claim for a higher amount, and the max is for you $2,000. So we do not necessarily need AI to do that. However, there could be implications as to why an applicant has submitted a bill of $2,500. So maybe there is something in the data that will kind of reveal that. And yeah, so those are all good findings. So AI will not outright reject an application that way, whereas a human might, right? And this is where we currently exploring with the clients what kind of biases that there are, and also what we can actually do to support processes in a very meaningful way. Again, of course, we're more worried about the downside risk of those, but there is a lot of upside risk, as I just mentioned. There's a lot that will be uncovered within organizations that might be the wrong bias done by decision-making done by humans versus actually an assessment done by an AI.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we're hearing insurance is an interesting one. It pops regularly as a higher risk use case, but we've heard from insurance companies that are using AI to make decisions when it's, or when very clearly a claim should be paid out. There's no need for a human to review that and say yes, when a model that's evaluating the circumstances can say yes. But if it's a no scenario, then maybe that's higher risk. So yeah, really interested to hear that you've had similar experiences there. I guess going back to you, Isuru, it sounds like Toku has a pretty mature approach. You've got your well documented principles there, and clearly it's important to you and your organization. You've been hired to lead this practice. Why do you think? Obviously, we have an interest in saying that it's important, but from somebody closer to our audience, why do you think responsible AI is important as opposed to just pushing ahead without regard for it?
Right. Okay. So first is when you solution for customers, like so there are multiple aspects. One is to gain the trust about your solution. I mean, whether these regulations are there or not, we must have an ethical practice and also a way to make people trust the systems that we build. So AI is all about automations, and we are trying to do what we used to do as humans using machines. So that's, I think, the core reason why we should be doing responsible AI, regardless there's of any regulations out there, right? And the other thing is, of course, for companies, it's good to have a framework that is repeatable, as I mentioned, because next day the challenge you're facing is going to be, who knows, right? And then you can't assume things and do something and get into trouble, because you might not see that you're getting into trouble until you really get into trouble. And the other thing is, since AI technologies are really new, you might not have past use cases, scenarios to refer and say, okay, if I do this, this would happen. So that's why we must have a framework to follow.
Great. Christian, do you have anything to add to that from your perspective?
I think the answer really, I mean, is actually pretty clear, right? We want to be responsible in whatever we do on a day-to-day basis, whether that's personal or in business life. So if we were to just imagine for a second that some of decision making or generation of things like content is taken over and done autonomously, I think there's absolutely no question that we need this to be done in a responsible way. Yeah, I don't even want to imagine a world where the other way around is the predominant one, right? I think there's one particular aspect for something I was going to say at this panel for other companies or business owners is you have no other choice than building AI responsibly, because if there ever is an incident with a client that will point out that you haven't taken care of this component, if you have built something a bit more reckless or rather ruthless in the sense of all we want is the most optimal result, then unfortunately this will likely backfire. It can potentially end the company right away. So yeah, I mean, in our mind here and in our philosophy, there's absolutely no question that this will go hand in hand with success, and we're trying to do as much as we can at a reasonable pace. I think being too definitive too early is also not possible, because again, we need some guardrails provided by higher authority as companies as well. So and that will, as I said earlier, come through the cloud. It will also come through governments, and that's good. Yeah.
Awesome. Really valuable addition, I think, and great to hear that your culture is so closely aligned to certainly ours. And I know our friends at the other cloud providers probably are thinking the same way. I certainly hope so as well. So we were speaking offline when preparing for this, and you mentioned that you've been in startups in Sri Lanka and Singapore before joining Toku. So I guess given you've done that a few times now, what's your guidance for startups trying to choose the priority, like the starting point for AI use cases, and maybe think about how you might choose them and do and execute them in a responsible way?
Yeah, sure. I can speak about that because myself, I was an entrepreneur, done a few startups before. So, I think it's very important to start with the why and really find your why, and that's define your problem statement, because there's no golden rule for doing responsible AI. It depends on your application. So you must look at your why and first build your responsible AI framework. And it's also important to note that developing something in AI it's something expensive, right? So you need to also think about how do you start building your responsible AI and the framework along with your AI application. And you should find something small to start and a way to scale them. And also very important to have a proper feedback loop. And one way we used to do is to get early feedback from customers through maybe your beta launches or POCs. You can get those feedbacks, and those feedbacks can really help you define your responsible AI framework. And I think it's very important to note at least the fairness and accountability. I mean, because other things, even let's say the privacy, can change depending on the use case. But thinking about the fairness is all about the biases, right? And then it ties back to the data. So these days, I think the world is going towards the tech world is going towards data being the most important asset than having a smart algorithm or smart AI. So data is everything that you're going to do in AI. So fairness ties back to your data. And when you have a data pipeline, you know exactly what you're doing. And then exactly defining where these human touch points are, tied back to, again, the data pipeline, and tying back to accountability is very important. And then you have to evaluate the real feedbacks, get some sample from the real world. And that's going to help you think about define a successful framework. And also, you can make your responsible AI framework your competitive edge if you adopt it, right? And that's going to be the differentiator, one of the main differentiation factors between you and your competitors. And as a startup, you always think about what your competitors are doing. How do I compete? Because it's tough these days and to define your uniqueness. So it's very important to figure out your own framework for responsible AI early on, like this?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really good summary. I did pick up there, that privacy may not be relevant for the use case, which is totally valid. And actually, we're seeing customers who are choosing to use databases or workloads that don't have personal information first, because that lowers your risk straight from the get-go. And if you do a use case where you can use non-PII databases, then that makes it just one step easier to play around with this technology. So yeah, really appreciate that. Before we go to one last question for both of you, I did want to just ask, maybe let's assume that we've chosen our use case now, and we're trying to execute on it in a responsible way. And maybe over to you, Christian, for this one, because you're working with customers figuring this out. Is what's the hardest principle to live by in your experience, and how have you helped customers sort of overcome or approach that challenge?
Well, I think we're kind of helping to educate our customers in that sense, because ultimately we're entrepreneurs, so we're not selling AI. So we're selling a solution for a problem, right? And how we derive at the best outcome is going to define if we succeed or not. And our customers, of course, if they were to be able to choose, they want to choose a solution that provides the best outcome. Now, that is in direct conflict with responsible AI, because you can let it loose and likely be better and faster as compared if you were to having to build all sorts of verifications, guardrails, even stop gaps in there, right? Now, so I think our responsibility here is to say, when we're reaching some kind of boundary where we could be, if we were to cross it, we could be making wrong decisions. And I think that is something our customers would not know, because, again, at the end of the day, we're solving a problem for them, so they would be happy, right? So I think the principle that we would want to address here is that we cannot assume that the data that we're getting and that we're training on will allow us to already know upfront whether we're making responsible decisions or not. So that is therefore the starting point of the discussion, where we say, okay, you provide us data, we will train a model, and then based on that, we will elaborate on if we're crossing lines or not, and if so, we will lay out for you why and how. Again, I can be very honest, we are currently still also exploring this with the customer, and therefore I wouldn't be able to be very concrete on how that sort of surfaces in the product and what exactly happens now that is different than without it. But what I can say, it is very obvious to a customer once we lay it out and say, okay, we cannot approve an application for a microloan fully autonomously in a scenario like this, like X, without potentially introducing some kind of bias. And that bias, again, is probably a very negative word. In the public, it usually always is seen as something that touches very sensitive points. But in a business world, it is actually a bit more hidden sometimes as to what that kind of bias is. And now, so from our perspective, I think our responsibility here is to actually introduce more and more to our customers from the outside where problems can arise and where we could be touching areas that are not easy to explain, and therefore it might be a problem for the customer themselves eventually why decisions are made in a certain way. Again, it goes all the way back to how we build a system, how many guardrails we have, are there sufficient logs everywhere where we can sort of backward engineer where things happened and why. And so that's ways for anyone to mitigate that, and kind of give the customer the confidence that as long as you lay it all out, it's all out in the open, there's always a way for them to course correct and at least pinpoint where things might have gone wrong. Yeah. So I think here transparency would be my principle to choose, where if that is a given, then eventually both sides can figure out where their boundaries are and what we need to do next.
Yeah, I think, we're seeing that as well, where, one of the things you mentioned, it's kind of asking people to put principles before short-term profits. And that's a really hard thing to sell. I think the important point is to remind people that short-term profits don't equal long-term profits. And if you go for that and then down the road something goes wrong, then those profits can be eroded pretty quickly, as you mentioned. So thank you. We're very close to time. And I did want, to hear from both of you as the experts, if you had one tip in maybe 2 to 3 sentences for startups that are starting their AI journey or are trying to mature what they've got, what would that tip be? And so, Asuru, can you jump in first?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I think it's very important to create a feedback loop. And really experiment and get feedbacks from the real world rather than assuming things, and iterate fast, because we actually don't know exactly where this technology is headed, right? And it's very important how to understand how people react and the real impact of our application on the real world. So building that feedback loop and iterate fast, and then scale is what I have to say.
Great, thank you. And Christian, same question to you.
Yeah, very simple. I think once the dust has settled around AI, we will all realize that close to nothing has changed when it comes to the challenges around building a startup. So I think what we all need to get back to is we're solving real world problems. And we have now more methods, better methods, faster, more powerful. But again, it boils down to, are we addressing a pain point? And is this something that can translate into a scalable product or not? If yes, then you can build a company. If no, then you pivot, or you find a way to make that happen. So I think honestly, the hype is around the technology, which is amazing. That's okay. But when it comes to the entrepreneurial journey, unfortunately, you start with the same problem that everybody. You need to find customers. AI, yes, no, maybe. I mean, that's really not the defining factor.
Great. Thank you both very much. I learned a lot, and this is a community that I love speaking to, because there's always fresh ideas and different ways of looking at things, and that's certainly been the case this afternoon as well. So thank you both very much for joining me. This is my first time in a live stream event, and so hopefully it went well and people have enjoyed it. But yeah, thank you very much to all of you for listening as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to our speakers and the moderator, Ben. It's not the easiest topic to speak, but yet very important. And some practical tips that I've learned: build feedback loop, iterate fast, scale, how we address a pain point, and how do we translate, to a scalable product. So I hope I got that right. So thank you so much, Christian, Isu, and thank you for leading this topic, Ben.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so to you that's watching this session today, we do have some resources for you to continue learning beyond today's session. So if you have enjoyed today's session, please join us for the next one. So I'll share more details here. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so the next one is with Marcus, who was actually a great hit in episode 2, and he's returning to share more about how you can actually integrate large language models with multimodal AI. So we also have one that's prepping you to be AI certified. So over here, Azure AI Fundamentals. Please take time to like and subscribe, or hit on the notify button so you'll be informed of the latest shows. Yeah. And switching gears a little, you probably know our mission at Microsoft is to empower every human and organization to achieve more, and this includes startups as well. So we want to enable founders and to be able to solve world problems and build a better future. So if you have plans to create a product centering around AI or accelerate your AI innovation, we have the Microsoft for Startups Founders Hub, a dynamic platform and ecosystem supporting founders like you from ideate stage to development, grow, and scale. So we're talking about free OpenAI credits up to 150 Azure credits itself, and access to heaps of development tools, support from our experts, third-party tools, etc. So yeah, I encourage you to check out the link. Just hide this away. Yeah. Okay, great. So finally, ta-da. Okay, we have also included a survey to today's session. If you have time, please help us fill that out. We'll greatly appreciate it. So the survey is important for us to know whether topics like this are useful, and if you would like us to, do relevant topics, what kind of topics you're looking for, let us know so we get some feedback. So yeah, thank you so much for taking time to join us today. Our session will be available on demand as well after today's session. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much, and have a lovely Thursday.